Flow, the first ever Latvian Oscar-winning movie, and the new national treasure of the country. Created by Gins Zībalodis almost entirely in Blender, which is a free software. Despite a relatively small budget and an independent team, the movie has an astonishing success across the entire world. And today I wanted to talk about its sound design and music. Not to specifically criticize, just to share my opinion as a sound designer on what could be potentially improved or changed. And even though my primary expertise is game sound design, since Latvia decided to invest into a movie and not a game, let's talk about the movie. So the first thing that really catches your attention is that there is no dialogue in the entire movie. All you hear is music and sound effects. It's quite unusual, and it comes with its cons and pros, you could say. Personally, for me, when I was in the cinema watching the movie, it felt like a new experience in a way, because we're so used to having a lot of things being thrown at us all the time, because the attention span of the viewer is constantly getting smaller and smaller. This movie, on the other hand, provides something completely different. As far as I know, the sound design was done by a team outside of Latvia, and it generally sounds really good. You couldn't say that it does not sound professional. It absolutely does, and it covers a lot, and it does its job, as I would say. But since the movie has no dialogue whatsoever, there is a lot of space for sound and music to take over, and this was not utilized. It might seem like a small detail, but honestly, this is an opportunity to really create a new layer of storytelling with both sound and music. And why is that important? I've found quite a few things about the movie that I did not understand because it wasn't explained quite as good as it could have with the auditory methods of storytelling. For example, in the movie there are these large, beautiful birds that I didn't really understand what they're supposed to be perceived as. To me, they don't really look threatening, but the cat seems to be quite an introvert and scared of the most of the animals, if not all of them, in the beginning of the movie. We can only understand this by looking at the cat's reactions, and sometimes they're not quite obvious. I feel like to the viewer it's not explained very well. Like intuitively, it's not as obvious that the cat is being threatened by some of these animals. For example, when the bird appears on the ship, there is a total lack of music. And when I was watching, I just thought, well, what am I supposed to feel? What is this about? Is it a new friend? Or is it supposed to be threatening? It's not explained with music or sound, and therefore it makes it more confusing. The sound does not really clarify the intent behind the appearance of the bird. In my opinion, this is a major shortcoming, because when a character or moment is ambiguous, sound is a powerful tool that could solidify the emotional context. And throughout the movie I find that you often see that sound is failing to support the emotional reaction of the characters. On the other hand, the music, I personally really liked it. I absolutely enjoyed the music, but the issue I've had with it is that I think it often does not describe what's really happening in the scene. You know, it's very calm, it's very soft. It kind of reminds me of this Minecraft kind of music by C418. And it works really nice in terms of aesthetics. But sometimes I feel like it just fails to really deliver this emotion the character is feeling. For example, in this chase scene, when the cat is running away from the birds, it's so cute and like it does not even feel like it's scary. Maybe that was the intent, because the cat was scared by everyone, and it's kind of his journey of becoming more comfortable with other animals. But these birds are dangerous to him because they were threatening, and the music doesn't really explain that. So again, in my opinion, the music is a great choice for fitting the visual aesthetics, but I think it just doesn't always quite deliver this emotional intensity of the scene. And now let's talk about silent movies. What do you know about silent movies? What is the main feature that always seems to be present in those? Some of the great ones, or even cartoons like Tom and Jerry, for example. Flow is pretty much a silent movie, but unlike silent movies, it lacks one very commonly shared feature that usually delivers the intent of the picture, which is adaptive music. Even in the case of cartoons such as Tom and Jerry, music is a key element of not just describing what's happening in the picture, but also doing the sound design. And I think it would be so great if there was a way to have the music do the sound design. Throughout the movie, there is quite a lot of scenes where the creators have chosen to just keep the sounds without the music, describing the moment only using sound design and having this raw, natural feeling about the scene without trying to explain too much with music. And Sometimes maybe that works, although I do have some contradictions with that. Imagine if you could have short pieces of music or musical sound effects that could be integrated into the sound to create another level of emotional explanation of the scene. For example, in the moments of tension when the cat is being pursued, these scenes feel disconnected emotionally. When the cat was trying to escape the bird in the water, we have this still soundscape. The cat has escaped the boat. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the big bird appears from behind. It was supposed to be scary. I was sitting in the cinema like, was I supposed to be scared? Maybe it's just me being stupid, but I don't think it's quite as expressed as it could be emotionally. Imagine if we just had a short stinger at that moment, something like this. The film is intentionally quiet and minimalistic, which adds to its atmosphere, but I find that the sound design struggles to fill the void. The environment is natural, which means there's not much variation in what you're hearing, mostly basing ambient sounds, wind, water, etc. And this leads to a lack of engagement with this sound world. In my opinion, it would be perfectly fine for any other picture, but in this case, when you're purely hearing the environmental sound design for like 80% of the movie, I think that does not quite do the trick. And the other like almost 20% would be the animal sounds and noises. And I don't know about y'all, but for me at least, it was so annoying to repetitively hear all these same meows and chirps and barks and whatnot. It's getting annoying, and I don't know if this is the issue of the way the movie is structured, but I feel like there's not much space to do things differently. Maybe the sound designers could try not to just record or use the original samples of the animals, but also try to process them in a way that would sound more alternating, or try different variations of samples. Especially these high-pitched birds, they are really heavy on the ears. I think it's really annoying. You know, in game sound design, you have to be cautious whether or not your sound is being tiring to the player, because this is important for how long you can have the player engaged. As they're getting tired, they're not as interested in continuing to play the game. While it's understandable to keep things realistic, it doesn't justify the repetitive use of the same few animal sounds. So again, I'm not too sure if I have the solutions for this, but as I said, you could probably try either doing more variations of sound types for each animal, or doing more processing specifically with pitch modulation and layering to try to get more different results. And also, creatively, explain the emotional state of the characters as they're being sound. The meows sometimes really fit for what's happening, and I'm sure that was intentional. But sometimes it's not doing the trick, especially with the bird. The bird is really hard to understand. It's not described with the music, it's not described with any emotional kind of sound to it. You can only logically try to make assumptions of what is going on and why it's happening. And you know, sometimes it just sounds like a zoo. And I don't know if you can do anything about it, but like this scene, yeah, that's messy. If I would be to redesign or change some of the things in the movie about the sound, I would probably mainly focus on the lack of narrative support through sound, as I find there are often no emotional cues in important moments. Sound design does not really do that. The music does sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't really do it right, I think. Because the emotional message of the music doesn't always fit with the narrative of the visual. For scenes like the cat drowning many times throughout the movie, there's a complete lack of auditory support to convey the gravity of the moment. I feel like the whole sound designer's motive was less is more for 90% of the movie. Despite the efforts to maximize this naturalism or realism in the soundscapes, lack of sound and music does make these scenes often feel detached. And the entire movie is quite hard to understand. I think everyone is guessing what was actually going on. Like, yeah, the flow happened, it was probably a biblical reference, but what was going on, really? What was this scene when the bird was with the cat in the sky? What was this supposed to mean? You can probably find a lot of deeper meanings and correlations to, say, biblical events or mythological principles, and that's fine. But throughout the movie, emotionally, it's often pretty hard to understand, as I said, what we are supposed to feel, even if we don't quite understand what's going on. Here's an example of my redesign for one of the scenes I felt like was totally not matching the experience. It's like a little show off, but you know, when the flow happens, I just did a completely different approach and created this wall of sound that is supposed to feel like it's threatening and it's big and it's gonna carry you away. And I don't understand why they did the opposite of this, because the entire movie is silent, and even in the action moments they choose to not have sound in it, so it doesn't really make sense to me. By the way, I was using a bunch of things I recorded myself, using sources like paper and water. And here's the TV tower of Riga, which is the capital of Latvia, where the movie is made. Pretty cool stuff. So here are my conclusions. The film sound design is good, but it doesn't fully support the emotional arc of the story. And there is a missed opportunity for the sound to give us cues about what's actually going on. The main way the movie does it is just showing the least and making it a thing. And that's cool, but it doesn't always work out. Utilizing music along with sound effects, having them work together closer, could have been a really interesting experiment to try to get sound design and music feel more organic and more explaining in terms of the plot. Yet I think we have to celebrate that such a nice movie, independently made, was able to reach this far, and this is a great change, I think, in the entire movie industry that this actually happened. And for the country of Latvia, where I'm from, this is really substantial. I hope you found my thoughts interesting, and if you have any thoughts or remarks, please make sure to mention them in comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ciao ciao.